Thank you so much all for coming. This is our first of two little lectures that we have invited international speakers to. And as you know, like the concept of our project this year is the Sensing House, creating an extended reality world. And we have invited two transdisciplinary artists, architects, like people who very much work at the intersection of many different fields, as we are also a very interdisciplinary crowd and group, of course. And the first talk today is by Uwe Brunner, who will also be joining us for the midterm crits on Thursday. So I think it's really nice. We thought if we should do it afterwards or before, and we actually decided it's actually really nice if you get to know his practice, get to know where he is an expert in, and then also having a different feeling of his, I don't know, comments on your work, or like where maybe he can also help you, of course, with your questions, with your own projects. And why we have decided to invite Uwe is because, he's very amazing, background in architecture, but also has initiated and created like a form of practice that is very specific, combining virtual reality design with like narrative or essayistic approach in his research. So he's doing his PhD at the moment in Vienna, and is also a faculty member, so researcher, but also educator at the University of Innsbruck in the experimental architecture department. So researching, educating, and then of course also practicing as an artist, like VR artist, who has exhibited internationally. I'm sure you will share different impressions of your exhibitions. And you have gotten numerous fellowships throughout the last years. You were part of like the residency program in Los Angeles, and also in Athens you got like a big fellowship with Osidana. So a lot of these work, as you also realize now, are very site-specific, very particular. So of course, these residencies, fellowships, I think are very important and influential. And I think one additional thing that Uwe, I think is special, that we invited him to speak about today, and also here within the context of the Hybrides Lernatelier, is that next to being a researcher, an educator, and artist, and he also initiated Vienna Architecture Summer School, so a very particular way of teaching that is non-institutionalized, or kind of, you are the expert, you will tell us all about it, but that is also trying to find new formats for teaching that follow different rules and structures. And I think maybe the most important thing I forgot, so you're the co-founder of SOAP, so your practice, and we are very excited to hear about your work and all these different parts, research, education. And thank you very much for coming today, all the way from Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the generous introduction and also for the invitation. I'm super happy to be here, and I'm also super happy to see your midterms in 2 days, actually, first day. Super curious what you are coming up with, or what you're working on. I just forgot I have to start my presentation. And I guess I have a lot of slides today, so let's see how it goes. And if there are pressing questions, you can also just interrupt me, I guess. Otherwise, we do the Q&A afterwards. But before you forget it, just interrupt me. And as Paula just said, that I'm part of the collective SOAP. And SOAP consists at the moment of 3 core members. It's me, Bettina Katja Lange, she's a scenographer and video artist from Berlin, and Dominique Schwab, he is a colleague from Innsbruck and also an architect. And SOAP stands for Some Online Architecture Practice. And as a practice, we're kind of interested in basically in online environments, online cultures, social media platforms, and in general how media kind of impacts, or I would even say dictates, our online and offline behaviors. And we see our architectural or design-based contributions basically in the field of, or in the domain of digital media, yeah. So, and we embrace a lot of different kind of formats and mediums to articulate ourselves, like short films, machinimas, video games, walking simulators, extended reality formats, and so on. And you will see that in a moment. Yeah, so just to give you also like a short introduction what we are currently working on, yeah, or what we are interested in our practice. And yeah, basically we are kind of interested in domesticities, and I think that also connects to your design course, yeah. And I think I will spend quite some time during the presentation on kind of reflecting about specifically domestic spaces and what's the relation between digital media and domestic spaces in our practice. And then we are kind of fascinated by archives, and as Paula said, also my research is really kind of diving into the essay and what is an essay. Could we think of an essay in a spatial environment? And we also like the format of walking simulators. Yeah, so as I said before, we are kind of interested in the intersection of domestic spaces and media, and especially we are looking at what kind of new kind of intimate formats are developing or emerging through this kind of saturated domestic spaces at the moment. And archives, yeah, we're kind of really fascinated by the potential of archives, the potential for space making, in a way, because archives usually deal with found footage or deal with kind of like what they are collections, right? And so we really, in our practice, we strive less for the unique or the novel, but we kind of gain our interests in the found footage, yeah, and in the connection of different found artifacts, yeah, and try to create new spaces, but that's what already exists. And yeah, and I think like maybe we can also discuss that later on. So the essay as a form of articulation or form of expression, we are kind of like really interested in. For us, it's really a way how we articulate ourselves, how we pose arguments, how we pose questions, and how we do that through spatial means. So I guess most of you know the essay from literature or from film or the video essay, but we try to really think of ways or strategies to translate it into spatial, digital spatial environments. Yeah, and as I said before, the walking simulator, I guess all of you know what's a walking simulator. It's kind of like a video game, but it's not really based on a win-lose scenario. So it's much more open, it's much more explorative game. And for us, we see the walking simulator as a kind of form of intervention, yeah, in architecture. So, and the idea of the talk today is basically to give you a little bit of an insight into our practice. So I will present 3 projects, a very old one and 2 newer ones. And then I will do an excursion into my teaching or in our teaching. And then in the end, I will present the Vienna Architecture Summer School, which I co-founded in 2022. Okay, so the first project I want to discuss here is See You at Home. And See You at Home is kind of a long-term project that started in 2021, basically with the beginning of the pandemic in Europe. And the project was initiated together with Joan Soler Adilon, professor, artist, and educator from Barcelona. And our motivation for the project was really the question of how our intimate space in times of being isolated, in times of being locked in during the pandemic, how this intimate space with our domestic realm would change. Yeah? And especially in that time where we kind of seek also for a ubiquitous connectivity through digital means, and how the intimate space would kind of dissolve, yeah, in this weird state of being. So we set up this web page, and we basically just asked people to send us short videos of about 1 minute that represents their most intimate and personal portion of space, where they are kind of being, yeah, locked up at the moment. Yeah? And we also asked them to narrate over this video, to either tell us a story, to pose questions, or just reflect about the situation they're in at the moment. And it was quite amazing because we received, we collected 1.5 years, we collected this kind of video testimonies, and we received kind of a couple of hundred different videos from more than 40 nations. And that was quite interesting, especially, I will go through a couple of them now, especially what people showed us, yeah? Like in terms of what did they record. We saw like videos of pets, like whole apartment tours. We kind of encountered like really dodgy basements and like really interesting transformed attics. So it was quite interesting to see what people sent us and also what kind of testimonies they sent with the videos. Yeah, you see it here. This was one from Beijing. Here we have some snippets from Istanbul, Mexico City, and Berlin. And we also we thought it's quite fascinating that people also started to scan themselves, so they really wanted to be presented in their videos as well. And I think also like in these videos, it's not only what people showed us through the lens of their phone camera, but it's also how they navigate through their space. Their gestures are kind of inscribed in those videos, right? The affect when they're walking through their flat, yeah? And I think that's quite interesting, yeah? So there's much more present in the video than just the depiction of the interior scene. Yeah, in a way, like what we did with this collection of videos was that we were interested in, of course, in how we can bring that to a spatial practice. And we started to experiment with photogrammetry. So we sliced those videos, or we kind of like extracted all the frames of those videos, and we generated those spatial fragments of each of the videos. And it's interesting because on the one hand, with the translation, you gain data, but you also lose data. Of course, we lost the dimension of time, but we gained like the third dimension. And I think like these documents, they kind of inhabit a strange position, a strange location between being kind of a documentary artifact, but on the other hand, they become also kind of fictional objects. So there's something in between which we are quite interested in. And I will show you now a couple of those fragments. This was one from Cairo, one from Helsinki, Marrakesh, Berlin. So just to get a little bit of a sense of how those fragments turned out. This was from Pristina, Mexico City, Riga. This was actually the first contribution we got from New York City. Barcelona. I think this one is from Innsbruck. Amsterdam, Tokyo, and Beijing. So I have to keep up with my notes here. Yeah, and so we kind of established this disorderly collection of samples, such as videos, snippets of testimonies, spatial fragments, empirical audio statements, and written text comments, but we also included our own experience, our own reflections of that time to this archive. And for us, this diverse set of data, and as I said before, that we are kind of interested in the archive, right? So we created this archive with this like diverse set of data, and we really started to combine spatial fragments with different audio statements. And for us, this composition and creating new arguments with these compositions or kind of like novel utterances really is for us a way of dealing with the essay also in space. Yeah? For us, this creation of combining things and building constellations is really an essayistic tendency or an essayistic approach to it. And then, of course, we made it inhabitable, yeah, through a walking simulator. I will show you a short excerpt now of a walkthrough in VR.
House is supposed to be safe, comfort zone, but with meetings like that, I don't know. Hashtag Zoom, hashtag Skype, hashtag privacy. At Second 7, the lockdown is messing up my confidence. At Stargate, since the lockdown, I only wear costumes at home. At Juan Gaîté, haha, a long time ago, being without a group and being an easy target for a bigger fish. Hashtag solidarity.
Je me suis rendu compte que ce qui est très important pour moi est de pouvoir se projeter, faire des plans.
Well, there wasn't really in quarantine where I was, in the west of Africa. But we couldn't leave the house so much as much as we wanted. So mostly I was sitting on the roof, drinking my beer, while the Muslim neighbors were praying downstairs. And I've been eating a lot, and a lot more than I could eat.
Beim Versuch, manchmal den Alltag zu überwinden, bekommt man ein anderes Gefühl gegenüber der Zeit. Auf der anderen Seite wurde ich ein bisschen geordneter, disziplinierter. Inzwischen habe ich mehr Texte als gewöhnlich übersetzt, Filme angeschaut und mich für ein Theaterstück vorbereiten können. Mein Leben ist nicht vollständig auf Eis gelegt, weil ich im Kosovo nach einigen Monaten mehr Möglichkeiten hatte als in Österreich.
I barely dream and forget about the dream. And then again, at least once a week or so, I feel like I have a déjà vu and I'm not paying that much attention to it anymore compared to when I was younger, because I just think, yeah, probably it.
Some of the objects are gifts from close friends or past relationships. The other guys over there, they're what I call my gang. Like, they are objects I collected in Mexico.
Okay, and like the whole experience is about 20 minutes, and you have to do it a couple of times if you want to see really all those different spaces. So what you just saw were like 4 different spaces. Yeah, and See at Home was exhibited in a lot of different like film and VR festivals, but also in gallery spaces. And when we exhibited it in gallery spaces, we kind of added an expansive kind of like, or like an extended scenography to it in the physical space. And this scenography would always change, like regarding the context of the space itself, but also the context of the country or city we are exhibiting in. And the same would happen for the VR experience itself. So as I said before, I mean, we are kind of really drawing from this huge archive what we collected, and we always would change spaces or like audio statements. And at the time when we started to present the work, this call was still open, so we still received different videos. So we would also like still incorporate those new contributions to the work itself. So it was kind of this living archive in a way, and it was always updated when we presented it in a different location. Yeah, and we also see that as I said, that we also changed always the physical setup. We also saw that as kind of part of the game of this work, because we always start to try, or we always want to kind of express ourselves with new kind of constellation of objects. Yeah. So for us, it was just natural to also always change the physical installation as well. And you will see it now. I will kind of expand a little bit on it. This was one exhibition at the ETH in Zurich, and this one was in Beijing at the Goethe-Institut. And you will see that there are always different elements, like kind of like entering the constellation of elements. And I think what's quite interesting here is that we could not enter China at that time because it was in 2022 or 21 actually, and we were still not allowed to enter it. So we did it with this kind of like, yeah, we curated it remotely. But we did an online workshop before with the local community, and we created this, this collective Mozilla Hubs room. And we streamed that room into the exhibition space. And this was actually a way for us to engage with the locals there at the exhibition, because we could be present there with our avatars, and people could just pose questions to us, and we could just really react in real time to them. So that was kind of a nice portal for us to be also present there in a way. Yeah. And this was a setup in Barcelona at the ICEA conference. And here we put much more emphasis on the text, on the audio statements, which we wrote down, and we mounted it on the walls, but then we also like spread it on the floor. And it was quite nice that over time people started to respond to those statements with their own reflections about the time, and just added them to this, to this pile of statements. It was actually quite a beautiful moment. And the last iteration actually was a quite recent one. It was this year, the Ars Electronica at the Deep Space. I'm not sure if you know that space. It's kind of like this 8K kind of immersive space where they have projections on the full side of the wall of the room and on the floor as well. And for that we did recording in the three-dimensional environment. So, but we did also a different staging of the elements. Again, a different version of the work itself. So the second project I want to present is the silver screen effect, and it has actually a double name. This is where I post from, but just out of simplification, I will just refer to it as the silver screen effect. And the silver screen effect was a work that we did last year, and it started in April in Los Angeles, and was part of the Schindler residency from the Max Center of Art and Architecture. And here we were specifically looking at the intersection of domestic space, social media, and, or I would say rather like real estate market and social media. I think that targets it more. And we were kind of like in that rim, we were also focusing on the content house, or like the phenomenon on of the content house, or the typology of the content house. Anybody knows what the content house is? You said yes. You're going to explain it to them.
I don't know. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think it was a house where a bunch of very immature online creators would live together in one site. And they would help each other with videos.
Yeah, I think it was a quite interesting phenomenon. I think there are not many existing anymore, but they kind of like popped up in Los Angeles, especially in Los Angeles, like mushrooms. And I think it started with the Hype House, no? Like so, yeah. So it started. I guess it started with the Hype House, but then at one point, like investors and real estate companies started to also buy big villas and curate different content creators and influencers and put them together in those villas. And it was kind of like, it turned more into a modern form of slavery. Yeah. So it was at one point very critical, yeah. And yeah, so we kind of started to explore content houses in this project, but then we got more and more interested in prop tech platforms. So property technology platforms, sorry. So and these platforms are quite interesting because they basically help you to buy, sell, and manage your real estates. Yeah? And while looking at these platforms, we encountered this weird phenomenon that like real estate agents or realtors started to become more and more like influencers, especially in LA. And they would kind of like gain 100,000s of followers, and they would sell actually most of their properties via Instagram and TikTok, which is also crazy actually. And strangely, in reverse, like a lot of content creators would start to use these property technology platforms, yeah, or real estate platforms to kind of create content with the content that's available on those platforms. So there's kind of this really strange dynamic happening. Yeah? And I don't know, like, let's see if it works. I would just want to show you maybe one or two of those kind of like realtor influencers. I think they're hilarious. Oh no. One more.
This is Speed Force. Let's take a look. Inside we go. We see the big, beautiful door keeping out the boogeyman. Right here's the piano. Up the red carpet we go because you're rich. One closet, two nights protecting you. Here's where Gaîté lives. There's a beautiful view over the valley. One closet, two closet. In the first bedroom, there's a blue wall and there's a nice view outside. Another closet. Bathroom number one, a beautiful view of me. Right here's a toilet. That's a shower. Double sink vanity. Most bathrooms do not have one. Over here we go. Bedroom number two, a beautiful view. Here's a walk-in closet. Across we go. Right here's where you wash your clothes. And in here's a toilet. Vanity here, and that's the jacuzzi. Down we go. Here's the kitchen area, beautiful spot. This is the toilet. That's
Yeah, okay, this is like this really, I mean, this is a weird phenomenon, but it kind of works for them, I guess, yeah. Yeah, so like one of the biggest real estate platforms in that sense is Zillow. Do you know Zillow? Ever heard of Zillow? So it's like very specific for the US. And Zillow kind of became the most popular platform to sell, buy, and manage properties online. And people would start to promote their own homes massively on this platform. So they would upload like a huge amount of images, like everyday scenarios of their interiors. But also they would start to 3D scan their place, or would just hire firms to do that for them. And you see what kind of content there's online, right? It's like not the super neatly staged, like apartment, but it's kind of like an everyday scenario, which is super weird to see. And you encounter everything there. You see what kind of medication people are taking. You encounter like weapons they are lying around. It's really shocking. But then, of course, as I said, then in reverse to real estate agencies becoming influencers, we have like those content creators.
Obsessing over this house. I so badly want to sit here with a Virginia Slim, the filthiest martini possible, and talk about soap opera drama. It's not allowed to end. That I will be staring at until further notice. Personally, I would fill that little ravine with plants and put a bunch of tchotchkes up on that wall. The room down the hallway is looking pretty haunted, but we'll get to that. The walls are in dire need of a Felix the Cat clock, but we can arrange that. The skylight, though? Oh, Jimmy Buffett would have loved this room. A Ouija room next to the Fiji room.
So this is Jonathan Carson, and he's like this kind of example from like, a content creator really becomes super popular and famous by kind of appropriating what's on like Zillow, like appropriating those listings and really comments on them. And he has like more than 20 million followers on TikTok. And it becomes even stranger like with Zillow. So Zillow became this platform where people just really spend time on it. The New York Times calls it like a platform to escape in a way. So Zillow surfing becomes a form of escapism. And I mean, the question is, what do people really do on that platform if they don't sell or manage their properties? So people would just watch properties, which they might afford one day or not, or if they go on vacations, they would just check what's the price range of these different areas they are doing their vacation. Or people would check their dates, which area they're living, and checking what kind of like value do the houses have there. So it becomes really absurd in a way, and people really got addicted by this platform. And I think this sketch from the Saturday Night Live shows that also pretty well. I guess you get the idea. But it's also interesting, for example, this Reddit post, one person is just stating that he loves to hang out in the house he previously owned, by just going through Zillow and just spends time in there, because there's so much content of those houses online. And it just becomes a little bit weird, and then it just bridges this really weird gap of voyeurism, but also being kind of like, having kind of an empathy, with people who live there or with those spaces. So it's kind of a strange kind of like, middle ground we're inhabiting here. And so we did six months of research on that topic, and in the end we came up with kind of a spatial diary of that research, where we kind of anchored the research we did, but also we kind of like exposed our own domestic life in the residence apartments. And for us, this is also an interesting, I think this is also, we became more and more interesting in our practice, how to kind of publish our work, how to make it accessible online for others, and how to also create kind of a like, how should I say it, like kind of a way of engaging people also in different ways, and also by publishing to create a different or like a new meaningful layer to the work itself. So it's not just basically illustrating what we have done there, but it also creates a new layer to the work itself. I would just show you how this turned out. Just show you one or two entries of this diary. So like all of those scans, so these are 3D scans, which are enhanced by annotations, basically where we anchored our research, and it's hosted on Sketchfab. You might know the platform, right? Yeah. So this is like a scan of our bathroom. And then there are different annotations that kind of sometimes very personal, like personal notes, but then it also goes more into kind of like explorations or in our inquiry. So it really traces also the research, what we did, and locates it in the 3D scan. So it also really creates this web again. So in itself, like this whole web page we created is kind of an archive, but within this pockets, these different like chapters, creates again this kind of constellation of different media that ties it together and tries to give you a glimpse into what we have researched over the course of this residency. And then for the final exhibition, or for the final show, we projected this diary back into our apartment, and we made our apartment public in that sense. So for the whole duration of the show, people could just enter the apartment and click through this diary. Yeah, and there was actually a second layer to this research, or to this project. At one point, we decided to create a fictional real estate company called Vapors, or it's kind of like a real estate company and entertainment company, Vapors. And this will also, like, we carry that company now with us, and you will see it appear in the next project as well. And as we like to appropriate things in a way, we took the Virgin Record Store logo to come up with our Vapors logo. And yeah, we did also as a part of the final show, like this performative walk through our neighborhood with a Vapors commercial balloon. So the next project is Be Real, and it expands on the last two projects we just saw. And in Be Real, we actually asked the question, what would happen if a company, let's say Vapors, would take over all these online 3D spaces that we just encountered and would just rent them out to people. Yeah? So as I showed before, you saw that like people are uploading on Zillow massive amount of data, massive amount of 3D scans, and we just basically ask, what happens with that? Yeah, what if a company comes and kind of rents them out? Yeah, and so taking this as a premise, we started to ask ourselves, how would our relationship to our own homes or houses would change if we would have this ability or availability to kind of just outsource our domesticity. It's really kind of an outsourcing of domesticity, right? And what kind of privacy issues, of course, would occur? And also what kind of new intimate relationships would kind of emerge through this platform, yeah? So, and the idea was not to kind of discuss that abstractly, but we really wanted to build a prototype of this platform, yeah? That would not only show how it would be if you could inhabit strangers' homes, but it would also kind of, yeah, let you experience it with kind of through a kind of critical lens as well. Oh, there's the sound. So we started to massively download all those available 3D spaces online. And it's also interesting because with most of these 3D scanning apps, and I guess you know Polycam, or I mean there are a huge amount of those on the market now. But most of these apps also provide these archives, yeah? So they give people the ability to just upload their scans and store them online. And most of the people are doing that, right? But they are not aware that they can also lock them, that you are not able to download them. And they are not aware what kind of license their scans then, or under which license their scans are. And most of them are under Creative Commons, yeah? Meaning that they give up basically all their rights to them. And so we started to download those spaces, and we started to kind of explore those different 3D scans. We navigated them, and it's quite interesting because, I mean, of course, those are scans or photogrammetries, and they're kind of like glitchy, they're fragmented, right? But they still have this authenticity in them, right? They are kind of, those are real scans from real people, and you kind of feel it. And this is also this weird conflation of, like, on the one hand, you know, like being a voyeurist or being voyeuristic, but on the other hand, you feel this empathy with the people who live there, actually, because you can so relate to those spaces. And so, like, in the first phase of this project, we basically downloaded them and we started to hang out in those spaces. Yeah? So we really practiced everyday domestic scenarios, like reading a book, like, or eating, or drinking, smoking, watching TV, or just napping. Yeah? And in the second phase of the project, we just invited other people to hang out with us, yeah, in those spaces. So, and we also started to think in more ephemeral terms, yeah. What if you would smell in VR? How does it feel to be touched in VR? Yeah. How does it feel to be cared for in VR? Or how does it actually feel to share a bed with a stranger in VR? Yeah. So this, of course, led to another set of questions, yeah. When do we actually cross borders? Yeah, when does it become too intimate, yeah, for the visitor? And I think these are quite interesting questions, and I think this is like a really interesting field to experiment with, yeah. And we became quite interested in this idea of a companion. And you see here Bettina, who is kind of guiding people through the experience. But she also becomes this medium that kind of connects the digital space with the physical space. Yeah? She would not just enhance the digital space, but she really would kind of, in a sensitive way, kind of relate to the person. Yeah? So she could really act in real time, yeah, and make it more comfortable for the person, for example, yeah. Or try to really cross borders and test out things. So she really becomes this medium between those two dimensions. And I think that was quite interesting to test with, or to experiment with. I don't know if this is interesting, but maybe to just give you a glimpse in how we work mostly. I mean, this is a linear experience. That means that you can move around. It's like a 6 degrees of freedom experience, but it has a linear narrative through it. Yeah? So we work a lot with timelines. It's basically like in an editing software for videos. Yeah? And we have like these different chapters of the experience. And we can maybe also discuss that later if you have questions. Yeah. And this was now like the first exhibition of that project at the Onassis Foundation in Athens. And it's with the on and off boarding, the whole experience is about 15 minutes long. Yeah? And through the whole experience, a narrator is basically guiding the visitor through the digital space or the game space, while a performer, in that sense also Bettina, is supporting the narration in the physical space. And the interesting part, or the interesting thing about the narration is that, of course, like at the beginning, this narrator is kind of like a salesperson trying to sell you this service, trying to sell you vapors, trying to really be your friend in a way, trying to be kind of likable and persuasive at the same time. But on the other hand, you know, throughout the experience, the narrator becomes more unstable. Yeah? So the narrator becomes much more insecure about it and starts to reflect upon this whole experience and what this service would mean. Yeah? And it like the narrator becomes also quite critical about it. Yeah? And I think this is a nice twist. So it brings you in almost like a sales pitch, but then in the end it becomes really very emotional and also very critical about the whole idea. And I think it's also like, while the narration is kind of a monologue, but it also becomes in a way a dialogue, yeah? Because it really makes you think with the narrator, it really makes you think with the experience itself. And I have like snippets from the whole, like from the run-through of the experience. Maybe we switch into that for a moment.
So you have a clear view and you hear me well. Just give me a sign. All right. I'm here next to you. Let me touch your shoulder. I will guide you, and no worries, I will stop you before you run into things. And for now, just have a seat here on that somehow oversized sign. Oh, look at that vacuum robot, so nicely done on these pond plants. What an excessive infinite space. All that is solid melts into air. So, vapors. You walk in, crash on the couch, and take a nap at someone you never met and never will, and who is not aware of all this either. All these personalities and a simple subscription service. You pay, they deliver. Real homes, real lives, always to your convenience. And that space, let's say that's how their lobby might look like. Vapors Virtual Plaza. Actually, there isn't much to see, don't you think? That place just brings me back to those weekends when my mom would take me to her office. That air-conditioned smell hits me right away. The sound of the copy machines, like the Song of Wales, all that styrofoam packaging, everything felt so alive. You know what I mean, huh? By the way, you should see your hands. Stretch out both of your hands. Never mind the glitch a little, but you should be able to see them. So vapors, yes, real homes and real lives. Imagine that's what they would say. Real homes, real lives, always to your convenience. Imagine start thinking you are already in the middle of that. Let's say that semi-functional prototype with some kind of vapor subscription test trial. Have a look. all these personalities, the love spots, real space is real. You understand? Look at all that, all these details. Yeah, come with me. Family picture, here, that couch to watch TV at night. All these personalities, all real, real spaces. And no matter what people were seeking for, whatever they're into, you would find it in such things and vapors. Look at all these details. I've always have been fascinated by that, haven't you? To sense the presence of others. That was the core of my internet addiction. Imagine such a thing here, wherever it belongs. I can find the ease I can't find anywhere else.
Okay, but you also get like the narrator, like the voice. I think for us it was really important that it's really spoken by a person, by an actor, and it also has this kind of like sensitivity. Yeah, there's this sensitivity in the voice. I think that's quite interesting. And that's how the exhibition turned out in the end. Here's some images from the space. And we were quite lucky with the space itself because it added this a second layer to the work itself. So while someone would be in VR and would be kind of taking on this voyeuristic position of going through this apartment, they would be seen from the outside as well. So they were in this glass cube in a way. So it had this mise en abîme situation where like the concept of the project would be just repeated. Okay, so now I would just make a small excursion into my teaching at the University of Innsbruck at the Department for Experimental Architecture, Studio 3. And I think this obsession with archives, with forms of appropriation and online cultures is also quite visible in my teaching. And most of my teaching has been together with my colleague Dominic Schwab. And this was a course, actually a bachelor course we did over a full year with two different classes. And in this course we explored specific modes of meme making, like sampling, copying, remixing, testing intertextual relationships, and of course appropriation. And we kind of like investigated how these modes could lead to forms of architectural articulations. And especially architectural articulations that are kind of like self-critical about their own modes of production, but also question the relationship of authorship in our digital like society or digital age, and eventually also poses the question, can architecture even keep up with our culture of communication at the moment? So it was a bachelor course, so like the methodology was quite strict. So students got architectural icons and they started to slice them in different fragments. And each time they would do an iteration on their model, they had to upload them to a server, to a database, and make them available for other students. So that means students were prompted kind of to steal those objects and to kind of incorporate them in their own design works. And that was the whole idea of the studio. So we created this massive kind of archive, and students could just like download them and kind of use all those fragments. And that was also quite interesting because people were really hesitating doing that, because of course like your design piece is kind of your little baby, right? You don't want to share it with others. And the second phase of the studio was to then really create, or what we call as combinatoria, kind of create these constellations of fragments. And yeah, and to really, and for us it was quite interesting to see kind of what kind of like fragments are really popular among students, yeah, which ones are circulate and which ones are recognizable in the different like designs, and this of course like connects back to the whole meme culture, right? Which memes are picked up by the public, which are kind of consequently left behind, and so on. Yeah. And then in the third chapter of this design studio was to kind of like adapt a different mode of looking at the design work, like really adopt a more narrative perspective or a more cinematic perspective, and really dive into those architectural designs and portray them from the inside. Yeah, so it's really a zoom in, and I think especially with this work of Ars Combinatoria that you really start to sketch. Yeah, it's kind of like a fast work of combining different fragments. You kind of like lose a sense for the spatial qualities you really create. And by going into those like cinematic mode, you really start to explore or re-explore your designs again. I think that was really an interesting way of really, yeah, of kind of showing the work, but also showing the intricate spaces people mostly composed by accident. Yeah. Yeah, and this cinematic lens is also was also quite interesting or important for us in this design studio, Age of You, which was a master course which we taught in 2021-2. I think it was the winter semester 21-22, and we looked with students at kind of the culture of streaming, yeah, or streaming culture, on a quite broad spectrum. So including what does it mean, what kind of technical infrastructure streaming culture is built on, what are the parasocial relationships that streaming culture establishes, what are the economical structures that evolved around streaming culture, and so on. Yeah? What are the different modes of labor, and so on. And students kind of like research the topic and would also project their ideas into the future. What would that mean in 50 years ahead? So the result of the studio was a 3D environment where students stage their inquiry or their research, and and little machinimas where they would guide through their environment. So they're kind of like, they're little machinimas or like little films, they're kind of small essayistic works that would take you on the hand and guide you through the environment. And yeah, we have like composed a little reel to give you a sense of those works, or give you an atmosphere how these works turned out. Okay, yeah, and I think in our teaching we also became quite interested in modes of presenting, yeah, how students present their works. And especially with our diploma students, we really test ways how we can actually add meaning and value to their presentations. And here, for example, I worked by Florian Kogler, and he created like this walking simulator that's kind of like, yeah, explores the relationship between matter and materiality in digital environments. And for his end presentation, he did this walkthrough, like a narrated walkthrough through his walking simulator. And by that, he is not just illustrating like what he has done throughout his master thesis, but he really adds a different layer, a new set of meanings to his project. Yeah? And I think that's quite interesting, and it's also quite contemporary, yeah, to present a work like that. And also like this other work, Machines Making Models, Meeting Models Making Machines, by Laura Neubauer. And this is quite interesting because she did research on model making and kind of researched the history of model making and saw in the game engine like the last iteration of the architectural model. And she would not just explore model making, but she would also kind of explore those landscapes that would be the source for the digital models, yeah, to kind of visualize these digital models. And for this video is unfortunately not running, but for her end presentation, it was quite interesting because she became a live DJ of her environment. So she had in her 3D environment a set of virtual cameras, and she would live switch between cameras, and sometimes she would take control over the camera and move through the environment. So she really became a live DJ of her environment for her presentation. And this kind of also earned her the award for the best diploma work this year or that year. And yeah, it was quite an interesting way of presenting her work, because each iteration could be just different, right? It could be just a different or like embody different meaning, because it would be always different. Yeah, and so the last chapter of this presentation is the Vienna Architecture Summer School, which I co-founded in 2022 with Jérôme Becker, Matthias Moroder, Eleni Palles, Dominik Schwab und Marlene Wagner. And it has this year its 4th iteration. And in a nutshell, like the Vienna Architecture Summer School is conceptualized as a, I think my videos are not like playing anymore. Let's see. Don't seem to play anymore. Anyways, so you stay with the poster from last year now. And it's kind of like conceptualized as an independent learning space, and at the same time a platform for inter-transdisciplinary exchange in the context of architecture, design, landscape design, urbanism, and arts. And independent means in a sense that we are not attached to any educational institution or university in both ways, like not financially and not infrastructurally. And we kind of try to establish a network beyond those institutions and also ideologies, I would say. And so like the whole summer school is funded publicly through state funding and city funding, and through the participation fee of the participants. Yeah. Is this also not running? Yeah. But in order to kind of like explain the summer school a little bit in more detail, I would structure it in accordingly to a couple of like points, and that would be location, participation, workshops, public program, excursion, and exhibition. Yeah, and so in terms of participation, in general, the summer school is conceptualized for students, graduates, and dropouts of any kind of discipline. Of course, like I have to admit that we get mostly design students or architectural students, but it's really an open school, open like field for discourse and exchange. And I think we also have to kind of like start to communicate it a little bit differently publicly, that we also gain more people from other fields as well. Yeah, but what's interesting is that we got from the beginning on a quite diverse international field of students. So already like in the first year we got students from the States and of course whole of Europe, and also like students more from the East. And yeah, and every year we host around 60 to 70 students. So in terms of sites or location, so the summer school is kind of moving around Vienna. So each year it's in a different location. The first year it was at the Karlsplatz. If you know Vienna, then you know that square. It's quite central in the city of Vienna. And we inhabited this office building next to the Karlskirche. In the second year, we got this little, compared to that one, it's kind of a little building over there, which is the Mensa of the former University of Economics. And it's an interesting space because at the moment it's still a self-organized space. So, yeah. And last year, we were part of this complex of buildings here. So we got this one production and manufacturing hall of the ÖBB, which is the Austrian Railway Association. And it was a quite interesting and nice space. I was not there personally, but Paula was there doing a workshop. I guess the space was really nice because it's this huge kind of like warehouse, and was a lot of space around, so there's not much happening actually, so we could kind of really occupy the whole space. And that's also a pity now that you don't see the video, but this year we're gonna occupy one of these pavilions, which is this whole area is was the mental health clinic. It was built in 1904, I think 1904 or 1907, and it's called the Otto Wagner Spital, and it's built by Otto Wagner, and it's very close to the woods. And I think what's interesting about this area is, on the one hand, it's a huge area. It's kind of abandoned. There are just like a couple of institutions spread out and occupy parts of some of the pavilions. But it's almost 300,000 square meters, and there are like this 34 pavilions, and we have this, or there's this monumental church in the middle, and it's basically this kind of almost abandoned area. And I think it has this weird atmosphere, and especially if you know the history of that place, which was, of course, like in the first place a mental health clinic, but then in the Second World War it really gained this dark history because there have been a lot of experimentation on children also, and it has this really dark history. And I think like this whole thing makes this place really interesting to engage with. So the workshops, in general, the workshops, they're quite free, so it's mostly up to the workshop hosts to really come up with a way of teaching, a way of methodology, a way of structure for their workshops. So we don't give any kind of framework. Of course, if they ask us, we are really happy to tell them what we think that works, yeah, because we already gained quite some experience. But in the end, it's very much up to the workshop hosts, and yeah, and that's maybe one thing we really want that workshops engage with, or workshop hosts engage with, and that's with Vienna or the site the summer school is placed at that particular year. But you see, I mean, there are a lot of different workshops, like engaging with food and architecture, design build workshops, photography workshops, model building. So we try to really have a diverse range of media, of teaching approaches, of teaching concepts, and in the end, like, the summer school does not really have a common theme or topic each year. So it's really, we really try to bring together a diverse program for students or for participants. And I think for us, this is also really important to give people the freedom to really develop their own teaching program, because a lot of practices we invite, they might teach at the university, but mostly in a university structure, they are not really gaining their own voice because they are teaching under a superior professor. And the summer school is really that place where they can really engage with their own way of teaching. They can really experiment with the participants and so on. So the summer school is really this platform who wants to have like fresh and new approaches to teaching. So on the public program, so each day closes with a public event, and that might take the form of a lecture, a gaming performance in that sense, or just a discussion, or sometimes even take on a more performative approach. But the public event each evening is, I think, a great opportunity on the one hand to introduce to the participants kind of the Viennese scene. So we mostly invite people who have a connection to Vienna or are based in Vienna. So like Viennese architects, designers, artists, and so on. And on the other hand, it's kind of like this point where a local community can kind of interface with the summer school. Yeah. So people from Vienna would also come there, and I think it's then a nice kind of like, melting pot of like artists, architects, summer school participants, and like the local community of Vienna. And also each week we have, or each year we have one day of excursion, and that excursion is basically, targets different places in Vienna, and we always try conceptually and atmospherically try to kind of create a contrast to the place the summer school is situated at that particular year. And here's some pictures of the excursion, and also from the Schwimmverein Donaukanal, where sometimes it becomes more adventurous, I think, the excursions. And then mostly we're all fine in the end, and we end up in one of those Viennese traditional Heurigen. And the summer school always closes with 2 days of exhibition, which is kind of conceptualized as a salon. So that means we would, as a group, walk through the different workshop stations, and we discuss the outcomes, and it's very much up to the workshop hosts and to the students or participants how they want to present their work. But it's also really a nice way of gathering and really get to know what others did during that 9 days of workshop. Yeah. Yeah. So like you see, this year the summer school is from the 30th of August until the 7th of September. And yeah, if you don't have any plans for the summer, stop by.
Could we potentially apply for the giving workshops? Or
This is already over, but you could for next year. Yeah. Yeah. That's it also. So I'm happy for any questions.